Welcome back to Book Break. The theme of this video is books about being a bit of a hot mess. These are super relatable books because we've all felt like a bit of a hot mess sometimes, and it's a super popular trend characterised by the obvious classic Bridget Jones's Diary. This is the book that basically every book since then about a young woman being a bit of a hot mess has been compared to. So in here we meet Bridget, a woman in her 30s struggling with all the same things that a lot of us struggle with. Her body image, her feeling that she's not succeeding enough in her job, her love life, her relationship with her very Mrs. Bennet-esque mother. This is a Pride and Prejudice retelling, but with a lot more Chardonnay. Basically every other book I'm about to mention in this video has been compared at one point or another to Bridget Jones. It's just that milestone that we measure other books by, and for good reason. It really is one of my favourites, but I think every other book on this list really does live up to the comparison as well, so get your wallets ready. So the next book I've got here is Confessions of a 40-something Fuck-Up by Alexandra Potter. So in this one we meet a woman called Nell who is in her 40s when her life kind of falls apart. She loses her job and her fiancé in one go. She has to move back from California to London, but once she's in London, of course the only kind of place she can afford to live is renting a room in a stranger's flat, so she feels like she's at a totally different stage of life to the rest of her friends. But then she meets a woman in her 80s who also feels like a bit of a mess in her own way, and they strike up this very unlikely friendship. Writers and Lovers by Lily King is set in the 90s, like Bridget Jones, but this feels like a more modern approach to that feeling of being a hot mess in your 30s. It's about that stage when you realise you're not the youngest kind of adult anymore, and your friends have such a big range of life stages. Some of them are married with kids. Some of them, like the protagonist in this book, are still working in service jobs that they hadn't quite intended to be doing for this long, and they're not really sure what comes next. It's very moving as well. So this book explores grief because our main character Casey has recently lost her mother. So it's a really beautiful book, but really funny and relatable as well. We follow Casey as she meets these two different men who offer very different futures for her. So she has to figure out how to forge a future for herself. My next book has been hyped up so much already, and it doesn't even come out until January, and that is Luster by Raven Leilani. So this is about Edie, who is working an admin job. She's the only black girl in an all-white office. She feels like she's constantly messing up, sleeping with the wrong men, and the only thing she wants to do in life is paint, and she hasn't even been doing any of that recently. And then she meets Eric, a middle-aged white man with an adopted black daughter, and an only sort of open marriage. So Edie kind of falls head first into this family, and it just perfectly captures the often brutal mess of being in your 20s. Now the next one you will find very relatable if you have spent sleepless nights wondering what you're going to do with your life. And if you haven't done that, how are you so perfect? So in Not Working by Lisa Owens, we follow Claire, who has just quit her job to find something she loves instead, but the problem is she's not quite sure what that's going to be. And Claire is a really funny heroine and very honest. She's confronting the best and worst parts of herself and kind of coming to terms with herself as a flawed but trying her best human, as we all are. So in this one you will find yourself highlighting sections to read aloud to your friends because they will just ring so true. A book that got a lot of Bridget Jones comparisons but is even messier than Bridget Jones is Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams, and I can't find my copy right now, but I will put the cover up on screen here. Queenie Jenkins is a hilarious and very flawed main character, dealing with a Jamaican British family who don't understand her, men who fetishize her, an ex-boyfriend who could never quite put in the work to understand the racism she was dealing with, and a job that isn't quite what it promised. She does have a group chat of wonderful friends, and the text messages between them were some of my favourite parts to read, though the friendships aren't also without their dramas and challenges. So it's on the one hand a really light-hearted, accessible book, and on the other quite a deep exploration of mental health and race and class and other issues that Bridget Jones never had to face. If I Can't Have You by Charlotte Levin takes being a hot mess to a whole new level. So Constance meets a new guy at work who she is convinced is going to change everything in her life. But what starts out as quite typical hot mess behaviour that we've maybe all done, a little bit of online stalking, quite quickly descends into a full-on obsession. So it just keeps getting darker and darker, but it's not a cliche crazy ex-girlfriend story at all. You will find that even when you're completely horrified by Constance's actions, you're still with her every step of the way. The Hot Mess in Anxious People by Fredrik Backman is a bank robber who fails at robbing a bank but ends up accidentally holding a group of people hostage instead. So the whole book is completely hilarious and ridiculous, but also surprisingly touching. We keep flashing back and forwards in time and connecting this whole ridiculous hostage situation to other events in each of the characters' lives. So it is just one accidental adventure after another with a group of people who could all be described as hot messes, but you'll also find it a very moving book as well. The next one on my list is very different, so I've got here If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha. This one's different because it's not a funny book, but the characters in here are all hot messes as well. So this is about a group of friends in South Korea, and we go between their different perspectives, seeing how they each navigate the social hierarchies and absurd beauty standards that they face. So it's often very sad and very unsettling, but it also gives a really good perspective that applies here in South Korea but also worldwide on why so many women do feel like hot messes, because society makes it really hard for us to feel like anything else. And then another book where funny meets sad is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. I've actually got the American cover here. The UK cover looks like this. So Eleanor Oliphant is a social misfit who is completely obsessed with a famous singer. So she spends her weekends alone, drinking vodka and dreaming about how she's going to end up with this singer. But then one day she witnesses a man collapsing in the street, and she ends up going to help and getting involved with this rather unlikely group of friends. And we learn throughout the book that Eleanor has a very traumatic past, so it is a very sad book, but it's also a very sweet, funny book about these different characters, all hot messes in their own ways, coming together to change each other's lives. And then finally, circling back to one that got a lot of Bridget Jones comparisons, Sophia Khan is Not Obliged by Ayesha Malik. This one is really fun. Sophia is a brilliant and hilarious protagonist who does work in publishing like her predecessor Bridget, but also faces a lot more everyday racism, and also happens to be a practicing Muslim who wears a hijab and inadvertently becomes the spokesperson for the London Muslim dating scene. She starts writing a book about it, and we get really funny extracts of that throughout. So all of the books on that list should help you feel like a little bit less of a hot mess, because even if you are, we're all in it together. And do also let me know some of your favourite recommendations in the comments below. I will link here to a playlist of our other videos talking about similar contemporary fiction, and I will see you next time.